Hello, this is Barrett from the C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College, and in this video we will be covering the Security Plus Lab series, identifying and analyzing network or host intrusion detection system alerts. What is an intrusion detection system, or IDS? Essentially, this is a device or software application that monitors a network or systems for malicious activity or policy violations. So once that activity is detected, it usually either reports this to either an administrator or what's called a SIEM, a Security Information and Event Management System. And so these will be placed in logs that we can further analyze. Now, the difference between a network IDS and a host IDS is, for a host IDS, that's going to be monitoring a specific system or end device, and specifically those operating system files. Now, for a network IDS, that's going to be analyzing incoming network traffic, on a entire network such as this, right? So what we'll be doing in this lab is we'll be doing some reconnaissance information gathering with Zenmap, or basically the graphical version of Nmap, on the Kali machine, the attacker machine. And then we'll be using a couple tools in Security Onion. So Security Onion is a free and open source Linux distribution specifically geared towards intrusion detection, enterprise security monitoring, and log analysis and management. It includes all kinds of security tools, two of which we'll be using today is Squill and Squirt. Essentially, Squirt is just the web application interface for Squill. Okay, so let's move to the first part of the lab. And that's going to be using Zenmap to scan network targets. So this will be a nice experiment in doing some reconnaissance. So we can find Zenmap from the applications menu up here. Go to Kali Linux. Of course, we're doing information gathering, and we will go to network scanners. And so you see Nmap here. Nmap is the command line version of the main source of this tool, but we're going to use Zenmap, which will essentially use the Nmap application, but displays it in this nice GUI format. Oh, and actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. The one thing we do want to make sure is that the NSM services are running on the Security Onion. So we'll come to the terminal here, and we'll type in sudo. We want to run this at root privilege, and then service NSM status. Whoops, my keyboard's stuck there. So this is going to just to make sure that all of the proper services are running. And NSM, it stands for Network Security Monitoring. Okay, great. So those are all set. So we're good to go. If you happened to come across any of these on your system that were not okay, you could just simply do sudo service NSM restart. What is up with my keyboard? There we go. So you would just type that out, and then that would restart the whole system and then get you up and running. But I imagine everybody on these systems should be okay since they're all running from the same images. Okay, so I'm going to close that. And now we can come back to our Kali machine and get going on Zenmap. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is set our targets. And as we could see, we have 3 different target areas here. So we're going to do 203.0.113.1. Most of you will probably start to recognize this IP. This is the pfSense firewall. And then you could just press space, and then we could give it another range. So we're going to do an entire network here, 192.168.1.0, TAC 24. This is, if you refer to the topology, this is going to be the internal network. So we're scanning the entire network here. In the real world, you may not know that there's technically or necessarily 3 systems on this network. So that's why we just scan the entire network and see which hosts are up. And then hit the spacebar one more time, and then we're going to scan the 10.1.1.0 TAC 28 network. And referring to the topology, we see that that is the DMZ network. We will go ahead and change the scan options. So let's remove these, and we're just going to change this to T5. So the T option here refers to, let me go ahead and get this scan going. It refers to timing, and T5 is going to be the fastest scan. T0, on the other hand, is the slowest scan. Now you may be thinking, okay, well, why wouldn't I just always want to do the fastest scan? Well, what we're doing in this lab is we're creating this sort of malicious active reconnaissance, information gathering that an attacker would be doing, creating all this information to see how that logs on our IDS. So if you're always doing fast scans, that's, almost definitely going to be picked up by, IDSs, IPSs, intrusion prevention systems, firewall detection, things like that. So sometimes if you do a T0 super slow scan, the frequency of those scans could potentially bypass certain rules. It all depends on the network. It all depends on the security devices and how they're set up to monitor. But essentially that is why that option can be useful to change in the future. Okay, great. So the scan has come back. So like I've said before, Zenmap is a graphical version of Nmap. What we're seeing here in this window is essentially the same thing we would see if we ran Nmap in the command line. But the cool thing about Zenmap is we can browse by host. We could take a look at only the ports. So it's much cleaner information for sure. It even gives you a topology page here. We could browse by the service. So let's say, okay, I really want to look into Kerberos. Okay, we see there's one host. What about HTTP? Okay, we see that port is open on most of the machines that we scanned. So yeah, this isn't necessarily a Zenmap or Nmap lab, but I definitely think it's useful to know how to navigate through these results. So now we could take a look at how this information was picked up on the security onion. So we're going to go ahead and move over here. We're going to double click on Squill. That's going to bring up a login. So this is going to be the same login and password as this particular machine. So it's SO admin, and the password is my password. The lab also details this information. And so we have to choose which interfaces we want to look at. You have to maximize this. You can click and drag. You can also just maximize there. And you just press the select all button below because we want to select all 4 of these to monitor. And we will start. Okay, and you already see we have information here. Some of this stuff is from 2018 when this lab was originally set up, so you can ignore those. I'm going to click on the date and time column twice to sort it so that the most recent 2020 scans that we just did are located at the top here. You can see all the way from here up are related to those scans that we just did in Zenmap. And you could show more information if you click on Show Packet Data and Show Rule. And you could also move these screens around a little bit to give you some more room to click on that little box. If you could see where I'm clicking and dragging, that way give you a little bit more information. Okay, so the lab is wanting us to do another scan, and we'll come back to this information here in just a bit. So we'll go back to our Kali machine, and this time we're going to scan on one particular machine, 10.1.1.10. Okay, so we can say, what machine is that? Okay, that is the DVL machine that's located in the DMC. So maybe we thought we want to look into this specific machine, get a little bit more information on it. So what we could do, we could select what's called an intent scan. And you see the options here change. I'm going to go ahead and scan, and we could talk through those different options. The T4, we've already talked about the timing, so it's not quite as fast as the T5 that we did previously, but this is still considered a pretty fast scan. Now the -V, this stands for verbose. You could start to see how it's updating us down here in the window. This is because we have this -V option selected. If we didn't have verbose mode activated, it would only show us the completed results once the scan is finished. But as we talk here, you will start to see this kind of move because we have the verbose option. Now the -A, this is the most important. This essentially stands for an aggressive scan, and this is doing multiple things. So a nice way for you to, if you're curious about Nmap a little bit more, and you want to get more information about these different options, you can pull up your command line, type in nmap and --help. And if you scroll up, this is showing you all of those different options. So you could see here the -T, timing and performance, set timing template, higher is faster. What we want to look at here is the -A. You're going to see it, like I mentioned before, it does a lot of different things. So we have enable OS detection or OS fingerprinting. It's trying to determine what version or what type of OS the machine is running. Version detection. So this is going to say, okay, we know you're open on port 22, which is SSH, but what version of SSH are you running? Or you're running a web server on port 80, what version of Apache are you running? So that's very important information because a lot of vulnerabilities depend on determining if what they're running is outdated. And also if you're doing this on an internal testing aspect, that's how you can quickly tell, wow, we're running an outdated version. We're susceptible to this vulnerability, so we need to get that patched. Now script scanning, built into Nmap, there is a Nmap Scripting engine, or NSE for short. Actually, I have a tab open here. So these are all, this is from the Nmap website, nmap.org. Highly recommend checking this out if you want to do a deep dive into Nmap. And you can see as I scroll, there's a lot of different scripts that are built into Nmap. So this -A option is running all of these at once. You can see it's oftentimes looking for specific vulnerabilities. Here's one where it checks if the FTP server allows anonymous logins. So it's doing all this stuff for us, and it's going to alert us about this information once the scan is complete. So if I keep scrolling here, you see there's lots of scripts to go through. Okay, so once again, I was just detailing here. This is a bit outside the scope of the lab, but I was just showing how you can pull up help information, get more details about the Nmap options. And the scan is done. Great, perfect timing. So as you can see, we can click on here. The results have likely updated because now we have things like version. So we know the SSH version. We know the version of Samba is 3 point something, so it's close. Sometimes it can't get all of the details, but it'll get you at least a little bit more detail that may be helpful. Okay, so now that we've done that intent scan, let's come back to the security onion. Let's take a look at what we have here. So we see more results here, more logs. If I scroll down here, okay, so we see the IP of the DVL, and from our Kali machine here, so we see in the information here, okay, there's the Nmap OS detection probe. So this is kind of like our IDS at work, right? Where we have these logs, we're the administrator, and we're gathering information saying, okay, hey, we may have a problem from this IP address. This person seems to be probing our network. They are running Nmap, and we could see from other suspicious logs here, we see suspicious inbound to Oracle SQL. Here is on port 3306 for MySQL. So we see all these other different types of attempts. We see the Nmap scripting engine that we were talking about. So that is due to running that aggressive scan. This is likely from Nmap trying to get information about NetBIOS, the Samba share access. That's probably from one of the Nmap scripts as well. So you could see how from a blue team or defensive aspect, how important it is to look through these logs and to determine which ones are malicious activity. And then, in this case, you could essentially block this IP, from making any more network connections or doing any more type of reconnaissance on your network. And we could also export. So the next part of this lab here, we can export all this data, all these logs to a text file. So let's say you could do one log at a time, but let's say I just want to capture everything that we've done here. I'm going to hold down Shift and select all of these. Come to Reports, report events to a text file, normal. Say OK there. We're going to call this Report 1. Exporting events. And now we can just come into the terminal. If I do a listing on this directory, we see report 1 listed here. And I could say cat report 1, concatenate short, or cat is short for concatenate. And that's just a way to print the output of this file to the screen. And so we could see all of these various logs broken up by these lines. Here we have suspicious inbound to PostgreSQL, port 5432. more suspicious inbound to MySQL. Looks like it was attempting to do a remote desktop RDP connection. So yeah, it's just all these things. And this is something that you would, as an administrator, you'd maybe send this to your team to look into, like I said, most likely blocking this IP address, or also potentially locking down some of these services, or making sure that they're updated and no extreme vulnerabilities found. Okay, so now in the third part of the lab, we're going to close out of Squill, and we're going to move into Squirt, which, as I mentioned before, it's essentially just a web version and pulls from the same data as Squill. As you can see, it loaded up Chrome browser. So we're going to click Advanced here. We'll say Proceed to localhost. That's okay. The username and password is the same, SOAdmin, and my password. Okay. And we can go ahead and refresh up here just to make sure it has all the latest information. We can create filters. So there is a filter icon here, and you can see in this lab, we're going to be filtering by IP, but you can search for filter by all sorts of things like destination IP, destination port, event status, source port IP, signature IDs, etc. And when it comes to incident response, working with logs, knowing how to query for the information that you want and using filters like this becomes super important, so that you can find the information you're looking for quickly. Because when you're dealing with logs from a large enterprise network, trust me, it's going to be a lot more information than what we're just seeing right here. So what we'll do first, we'll filter by IP. You just type in IP, and we'll filter by the DVL machine. So we're looking for anything that's hitting the DVL server. Okay, so that brings us back a slightly shorter list. And another thing that we could filter by is the various sensors. So these are related to the different network interfaces that are being monitored. So we could say, okay, show us only what is on the ETH0 network. And you don't need to hit save or anything. It instantly goes into place when you hit the check mark. Just exit out of here. And then you have to come back up to the filter here, press enter again. Now you see those all disappeared because those were not picked up on that specific network interface. So we just have to change this IP address here. We'll change it to 192.168.1.50. It's the Ubuntu machine. And when we press enter, you see, because we're still filtered on the ETH0 sensor. And so that is the network interface that is picking up the internal network, or the Ubuntu machine. And that is looking like that is the end of the lab as far as the various steps. As you can see in Squirt, it's very similar information. You have those, suspicious inbound SQL requests. If we pulled up everything, let me clear out these filters. You see those SSH scans, you see the Nmap scripting engines. So very similar information. You see how it rates things from priority, high, medium, low. Summary is a really nice view as well, especially if you think about being in a super large network. If you're looking at logs from the entire day and how much detail you could find, top signatures. So the top, just from these scans, were from the Nmap scripting engine. Top source IPs. So if you had one particular machine that was really attacking your network, obviously that's going to show up at the top of the list here. So that's going to allow you to quickly take action on that and do some more research. Where is this coming from? And should I block this? Shows you destination IPs. This is, within your network. Shows you, potentially top source countries, top destination countries, source ports. Shows you which ports are being targeted the most. So yeah, lots of really good information on this summary page. So that wraps up this lab. Once again, this was the Security Plus Lab series, identifying and analyzing network or host intrusion detection system alerts. Thanks a lot for watching.